The G7 has issued a verdict on Putin. Ukraine was given weapons for powerful strikes against Russia. The man in the bunker miscalculated. The longer the war, the stronger Ukraine becomes. Trump and Europe are preparing a surprise for the Kremlin. The interests of the US and the EU have aligned once again. Pressure on Moscow will increase sharply. Sleepless nights await the Kremlin. Ukrainian ballistics are reaching a new level. Fedorov shocked everyone with his statement. The truth that will shock everyone? Don't miss all the most important news right now. Welcome everyone to our YouTube channel. Today our guest is Abbas Galyamov, a political strategist. We're glad to see you.
Hello, I'm glad to be here too.
There are several topics for discussion. Let's start with the G7 summit and the joint communique. Just a reminder of what's being promised to Ukraine. These are additional air defense systems and interceptor missiles, expansion of long-range capabilities, production of Western weapons at Ukrainian enterprises, and new sanctions against Russian oil and gas. The question arises, can we consider this communique a kind of personal signal to Putin? The longer the Kremlin drags out the war, the more Ukraine will be strengthened, and the more opportunities and weapons there will be for Ukraine from Western partners.
Well, look, reducing the entire communique and its content to a signal to Putin isn't quite correct in the sense that, well, you see, a signal is a kind of fiction. Yes, but here we're talking about substantive, essential things. Therefore, even if you see a signal, well, it was sent to Putin and he ignored it, for example. Yes, and that's it. The signal has failed, so to speak. But will it be like that in this case? No. Ukraine will still get its weapons and Russia will face new rounds of sanctions pressure. The situation for Russia will worsen, and this will happen objectively, regardless of what Putin does. Yes, so it's much more than just a signal. But besides everything else, besides the real substantive content of the decisions made, well, there is, of course, a signal here. A signal not only to Putin, again, but also a signal to the entire Russian establishment, the ruling class, and the entire Russian population. So guys, well, you can certainly continue to do nothing, yes, but then the gasoline shortage that's currently in half of the Russian regions, although it's already more than half, I think, well, it will be in all regions. It will become more severe. Right now they're giving you, say, 20 liters of gas, but they'll give you 10, then 5, and then you'll just get on a cart and go. You're supporters of conservative values, aren't you? Well, be consistent. For you, the truth isn't ahead, but behind in the past. Well, then abandoning the internal combustion engine is just a natural result of your own desires. As they say, be careful what you wish for, because it just might come true, right? Well, I'm joking around a bit here, of course, yeah, but basically, in essence, this is a message to everyone else. If you don't like this, well, stop keeping quiet. Make sure Putin hears your point of view. Something like that.
How can the people and those in Putin's inner circle manage to get their own point of view across? What will be that final decisive point, the one that once crossed means there is truly no turning back?
No, well, it's already started. The KPRF, for example, a party that until recently was, well, quite integrated into, so to speak, into the, well, the system, and didn't bother the system with, excessive free thinking. But through the words of two State Duma deputies in a row, first Suleimanov, then Markayev, it sent a clear signal that it no longer intends to stay silent. Well, we'll see what happens next. And theoretically, they could tighten the screws, shut them up, but whether that'll work isn't entirely clear. Anyway, two deputies, first Suleimanov, who said directly that the SVO must end because the Russian economy won't be able to sustain it. He said that an unacceptably large part of the budget is just burning up, so to speak, in the furnace of war. So there's no talk of any kind of development. All those figures, the formal economic growth figures that the Kremlin is trying to feed us, well, you see, it's actually, for the most part, largely a fiction because, well, in terms of consumer value, the goods being mass-produced now, tanks, guns, drones, and all that sort of thing, yeah, they really don't. I mean, honestly, they just don't. Well, the truth is they have absolutely no consumer value. So people, regular people, just don't see any real benefits from this kind of economy. Yes, the figure is there, but the metal goes to the front and burns up there in the furnace of war. Yes, well, it's a very clear signal sent in the language that most Russians speak and understand. That is, it's not the language of the war is unjust or the war is wrong. Instead, it's a message that is being delivered in a way that really resonates with people, using words and expressions that are familiar to them, ones they hear in their daily lives. making it even more impactful and harder to ignore. Yeah, or like war is inhumane, right? Among those who stayed, the majority has, well, already rejected that language. Yes, because that message has been voiced since day one of the war by essentially the entire progressive global community and a large part of those who left, meaning the Russian liberal opposition. But those who stayed, well, partly due to repression. You have to understand that. It's not by choice, but nevertheless, for whatever reasons, they've basically, so to speak, plugged their ears. They don't hear those arguments, but the arguments Suleimanov is talking about, they do hear. Markov speaks out, says, adds to these arguments. He says, look at what's actually happening. The war is essentially, well, unjust. That is, the people are getting poorer while the rich get richer. Where is the social justice? Well, that is essentially, if you really look at the root of it, it's actually the very same message that once upon a time ended in collapse for the regime about 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Following the First World War. You remember, our task is to turn, these are the predecessors of these Markaevs and Zhuganovs, right? Our task is to turn the imperialist war into a civil war. Peace to the huts, war to the palaces. Well, essentially, Markaev's message is about that. He doesn't directly call for, well, not to commit suicide. He doesn't directly call for an uprising. But essentially, he leads to the thought that, well, an uprising is inevitable. And at the end of his appeal, he says exactly that, that it will end in a social explosion eventually, right? And that is also very clear to those who remained there. Therefore, the system has already begun to produce discontent. Well, of course, given the factor of repression, no one wants to repeat the fate of Navalny or, say, Prigozhin, right? So that is why it is usually done a bit more discreetly, a bit more carefully, with a little extra caution. But as history has shown us, in general, radical slogans do not appear before the revolution begins. Instead, they tend to emerge and become more prominent during the revolution itself. Both the Great French Revolution and the English Revolution of the 17th century, for example, and our revolution of 1917, the February one. They didn't start with the words, so to speak, off with the king's head, right? They all started with some fairly moderate slogans, and only as things progressed, as the situation developed, well, the slogans gradually radicalized, and after some time it ended in, well, what we are really seeing here is, quite frankly, a genuine social and political catastrophe. There. Therefore, the fact that at the current stage such radical slogans are not heard from within the system, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that the system can just sleep soundly and without any concerns. So the ice has broken, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Why have such large-scale decisions from the G7, from the European Union emerged right now? Is this a reaction to some actions by Russia, to Ukraine's successes, to what is happening in principle in individual countries of the European Union?
You know, as they've said in Russia since time immemorial, he is the master who can do everything alone, right? Or as they say now, help yourself, right? That is, the point is that, well, if you can't handle the problem yourself, no one will help you. But if you're able to handle it, then people will rush in and start helping, right? So, of course, this is primarily a reaction to Ukraine's successes and Russia's failures. That is enough for those doubting that, you see, from the very beginning, there were very serious doubts. Well, you remember, say, March of 2022? Well, how can we send our best weaponry to Ukraine now? The Russians will just destroy them in a day or two, and all those weapons will fall into Russian hands. Are you crazy or what, right? And that's why real deliveries only started when it became clear that the Russians, they failed to crush Ukraine, only after Russia retreated from near Kiev. Once that became clear, well, that's when the real large-scale aid actually began, right? And in this case, the same thing is happening with the skeptic, saying, oh, come on, why bother? It's all useless. Putin will crush them anyway, Putin will win, so we'll have to negotiate on his terms. So why spend a ton of money now while Ukrainians die by the thousands at the front, risking nuclear escalation? And in the end, we'll still end up exactly where we're going to end up. Why suffer? Let's just give him Donbass right now and be done with it, right? That same voice is being heard in the West. And in a situation where Russia advances and Ukraine retreats, well, that voice sounds convincing. But in a situation where every single day starts with news about another Russian oil refinery on fire, yesterday Nizhnekamsk, Tatneft. Today there's news that after yesterday's strike, the Moscow refinery was shut down. Yes, the Moscow oil refinery in Kapotnya. Right. So how does the voice of these Putin understanders sound now? Not so convincing anymore, to put it mildly, right? While the voice of those saying, we must help Ukraine, well, it sounds more convincing, right? So what's happening now is what's known in the American tradition as the bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect. And do you know how that works? Well, people subconsciously want to join in on success. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's just right there on a subconscious level. Why was it called a bandwagon? Well, this saying was born sometime probably in the American South. So imagine you're working in a field, the sun is blazing down, sweat is pouring down your face, and you have to till the soil with this hoe, right? And a wagon goes by on the road with a band sitting there playing. People are following the wagon, dancing and singing. Of course, you want to drop that hoe and run over there to join the celebration, right? Right. So in this case, we're seeing that very same bandwagon effect.
What could be the levers of influence and pressure in the negotiating positions of Ukraine and Russia right now? Now that we see there are successes for Ukraine on the front, there's this massive aid from the West, and Trump seems set to get involved again, right? A quid pro quo. I'll pressure the Russian Federation, you help me with the strait. But so far we see that the Kremlin isn't particularly keen on negotiating.
Well, it's always like that. Right up until the moment he wants to. He won't want to, you see?
And when will he... But what exactly has to happen for him to want to?
Well, who could know, you see? Even Putin himself doesn't know. You see, at what point you'll break. Well, you endure for now, it seems, yeah. But the situation is objectively worsening. So at some point, that very straw that breaks the camel's back, as they say, well, eventually it will fall on that back. Yes, and for the person who's trying to break that back, so to speak, that straw keeps piling up, right? Well, his task isn't to calculate which straw will be next, right? His task is just to keep throwing them, you see? Right? It's impossible to predict. It's a multi-factor process. It's not clear at all where it'll snap, whether it's because there's no gas or because, I don't know, units at the front start mutinying, or, well, something like a new Prigozhin rebellion happens.
Or ballistic missiles start flying.
And ballistics will appear, yeah. Or actually, completely unexpected things could happen. Well, Putin, so to speak, could have a stroke. You see, he's absolutely seething with rage. Why did he strike the Lavra? Well, it's quite obvious that it's completely disadvantageous for him personally in terms of positioning, both within Russia and on the international stage. He's literally knocking the cards out of the hands of his own Putin versteyers, his allies. That same Tucker Carlson is running around America, you know, running in circles and shouting that Putin is a defender, so to speak, of the church, a fine defender of the church. Here's a picture of how he protects churches, right? And Zelensky, not by chance and quite rightly, showed Trump photos of this burning church. And as the media reports, the photos made a big impression on him, on Trump, because his electorate, he can't ignore it. Maybe deep down he doesn't give a damn about any of it. Trump is a cynic. Yes, but his electorate is very religious.
Right, you remember, we all recall how Mr. Rubio was the one who kept bailing him out time after time.
I didn't catch that. Bailing who out?
Trump, following the statements. Oh, about the Pope.
Regarding the Pope?
Yes?
Yes, but that's still, well, you see, there's a conflict with the institution, but here it's just, well, a historical monument, a church being destroyed, burning in flames. There was at least some politics in it, you know, a political conflict. I mean, the Pope really took such an anti-war stance for Trump. Trump is waging a war. So the Pope got into politics in this case, you see? That's why the conflict there is ambiguous, not so bad. But here it's just a pure anti-Putin message. I mean, there's a church that stood for over 1,000 years, right? And then Putin just goes and does this. Hits this church with ballistics. Or not ballistics, a drone, sorry, a Jiren, right? So, I mean, it's a completely different story. There's absolutely no justification for this at all. Just look at it historically. Who tried to destroy this church before? Batu Khan, the Crimean Khan, Mengli Gire, and the Nazis? Well, Putin fits right in with them in that lineup.
Well, basically nothing supernatural. It's logically correct.
But you see, in politics, the image is what rules. And here's the image, a church, an ancient church in flames, you see? And for a religious audience, it's like a knife to the heart. So basically, Carlson now, well, he'll just ask for much more money from Putin. The costs are rising, you see? I mean, you know, before, relatively speaking, he actually did this for something like 10 million, but now he'll just say, no, guys, honestly, I have to say things that work so much against me, things that really don't help me at all. Carlson is actually scaring off his own audience whenever he is clearly talking complete nonsense. So you can be sure that he definitely will not do it for free. Yes, and that is exactly how the costs keep growing over time. You know, Putin already has financial problems piling up to his neck, doesn't he? And then, because of this situation, Carlson will probably end up asking for yet another 10 million or so just to keep things going. Then the AfD in Germany will ask for more, and so on. They're constantly bargaining. These people, all of Putin's allies, you have to understand, are very cynical and make a lot of money from supporting him. Ukraine's allies, including countries in Europe, are doing this at their own expense, covering the cost themselves. But in Putin's case, all this dancing is at Putin's expense, yes. So you see, this is actually just simply counterproductive for Putin himself. But despite that, he still goes ahead and does it anyway. Why is that really? Well, because hatred is just seething inside him. He always wants to do something nasty. Just like he said, since they're acting like that, what I'll do is hit them from the right and also from the left. You see, in a situation like this, honestly, I really wouldn't be surprised at all if he ended up having a stroke or something similar, you know? It's just that intense. I mean, basically, you know, a stroke for a man of his age who, judging by his overall appearance, seems to have stopped leading a truly healthy lifestyle. Well, sometimes he really doesn't look like someone who actually lives healthily. So for him, this kind of ongoing nervous tension, this hatred that's just boiling inside him with no real outlet, well, it's honestly, I think, pretty risky for his health. It's the sort of thing that can really take a toll on someone over time. That's why there could be a completely unexpected end, not the one we're thinking of. So returning to the question of the last straw, what it will be, when, what it'll look like, where it'll come from, no one can predict. And it's never happened before, never. No one has ever been able to predict it. The people who led the revolution of 1917, a month before it happened, not even a month, a week before. I mean, you can read it in their diaries and memoirs. Everyone dreamed of revolution, but no one believed it would come right then. And then suddenly...
Visibly.
It visibly arrived? Yes.
Well, Trump could also, in fact, add a bit more fuel to the fire and be even tougher on Putin and the Russian Federation. That is to say, if we're really talking about a quid pro quo here, right, then the Strait of Hormuz and Trump's notably tough stance come into play. Towards the Russian Federation and more loyal to Ukraine? Actually, what can Ukraine bargain for here? What concessions might the Russian Federation make, and can Trump push that through?
What exactly can Ukraine realistically bargain for from
Putin?
From Russia or Putin?
Yes, well, if we consider the situation.
No, in my opinion, the position...
The European Union is providing assistance to Trump, and in turn, Trump is supporting both the European Union and Ukraine in their efforts to bring an end to the ongoing war.
Well, in my opinion, Ukraine's position, as I currently understand it, has been formed in the following way. We are talking about stopping the war along the front line, bringing an end to the fighting there. Yes, that's right.
Ceasefire first, and then...
Yes. So what this means is that we are not going to use military force to retake the territories that Russia has seized. However, it is important to stress that we will never, under any circumstances, recognize those territories as Russian. Right, so, I mean, a de facto peace, not de jure, yes. Right, well, that's the, so to speak, maximum program. That is, Ukraine can count on achieving this, considering the current circumstances and the support it has received. Of course, there could be some tactical shifts along the way. For example, there might be temporary truces or pauses in fighting, such as stopping strikes on certain cities for a time. These kinds of tactical changes can happen for different reasons, like humanitarian concerns or to allow for negotiations. While the main goal remains the same, the process of reaching it may involve these sorts of temporary adjustments or interruptions in the fighting on civilian targets there. So, some intermediate forms are also possible. Well, it's a matter of what Ukraine focuses on, what we want to get, while accompanying it with increasingly powerful strikes. Well, that's exactly what Ukraine... And it will... That's what Ukraine will be able to claim, you see. So, well, you shouldn't be asking me, so to speak. It's more about what Zelensky will insist on first and foremost.
If I get the chance, I'll definitely ask him. About Fedorov, his statement regarding...
You have a democracy, after all. You have a democracy. So here...
In principle, I could tag him on Instagram.
Well, of course, you can send inquiries to the press service and, you know, find out exactly what Zelensky is insisting on right now. And then in the next broadcast, we'll be happy to discuss it with you.
We'll try.
Their priorities, for example.
I also want to ask you about Fedorov's statement and Ukrainian ballistics. If, well, actually not if, but rather when it does eventually fly towards the Russian Federation, how do you think that will affect or perhaps influence the internal political situation within the Russian Federation? And how might that in turn impact the perception of the war by Russian society as a whole?
Well, of course, it will be a very strong factor of pressure on this camp of war supporters. I published a column just an hour ago, so you can find the link on my Telegram channel and on Facebook, where I talk about the results of a recent sociological study. It's a qualitative study, a series of focus groups. So, well, the person who organized it shared some findings with me. I haven't seen the raw data, of course, and I won't lie, I haven't even seen the report, but the person just told me about the conclusions he made himself. And compared to the previous year, he conducted a similar study a year ago. Anti-war sentiments have grown very, very much. That is, across the whole country, the sentiment is, well, either go ahead and win quickly if you can win, and if you can't, then end it. Like that. So in Moscow, he specifically told me three, well, that is, the growth of dissatisfaction with the regime and Putin personally. The taboo on personal criticism of Putin feels lifted. I mean, people are certainly afraid in many cases, yes, but in principle, it's clear there's no reverence for him anymore. And regarding Moscow, well, he has separate findings for Moscow, for regional centers, and for district centers. So for Moscow, he said that he gave me three key factors of dissatisfaction. In first place is the suppression of freedoms. This is primarily about the internet, but it's not limited to the internet. It's broader. The argument goes like this. They're already deciding for us not only what we should and shouldn't say, but even what we should and shouldn't think, and that outrages people. So in Moscow, that's the primary factor. It's actually surprising because everyone's gotten used to the idea, well, starting from the 2000s, that is, over the last quarter century, they've gotten used to the conclusion that they've concluded that Russians don't value freedom. And strictly speaking, Russians themselves have come to this conclusion that they supposedly don't value freedom. And now suddenly it turns out, in exact accordance with the saying that we don't cherish what we have, we weep for what's lost, and once they lost it, they realize that they actually needed it. Yeah. Anyway, in second place is the factor of physical fear, meaning the war has come to our home, so to speak, right? So they fear for themselves, for their loved ones, they fear drone strikes. In Moscow, this is already clearly heard. And if ballistic missiles appear in addition to drones, well, this fear will just grow. It will move to first place. It will weigh on people. So for now, you see, we don't protest. We don't demand an end to the war because it's scary. As long as you're silent, they don't touch you. Start protesting and they'll touch you. But when reality becomes such that
it'll be impossible to stay silent.
Huh?
I'm saying when reality becomes such that it's impossible to stay silent.
Well, when you're just silent, right now you're silent. You're safe. But then you're silent and you're in danger. You won't get a baton to the head from a riot cop or a criminal case, but a ballistic missile will hit and blow everything up, right? And in this situation, well, people start looking at everything differently. Meaning that protest stops being so scary because the prospect of dying as a result of a physical attack, well, it will push people toward activating their anti-war stance, at least in social media for a start. Yeah, so, of course, this will be a powerful factor, yes.
Let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for finding the time to talk to our audience. We're always happy to see you.
Thank you, all the best.